NATO jets scrambling, Ukrainian drones crossing alliance borders. And now, Western leaders openly discussing how to help Kyiv direct strikes deeper into Russia. As Baltic airspace turns into a new flashpoint, one terrifying question is emerging. How close is NATO drifting toward direct war with Moscow? NATO is facing growing pressure over Ukrainian drones repeatedly entering alliance airspace, as Sweden's Prime Minister openly called for greater Western involvement in helping Kyiv direct its drone attacks. The comments come amid escalating tensions across the Baltics and rising fears that the war in Ukraine could drift dangerously closer to direct confrontation between Russia and NATO. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said NATO countries should assist Ukraine in directing its drone operations in the right directions, while dismissing Russian accusations that neighbouring NATO states are enabling attacks against Russian territory.
Well, it's my firm belief that the Ukrainians are they certainly don't want their drones to end up on friendly territory for obvious reasons. Sometimes it's a matter of jamming, sometimes it's a matter of other disturbances, and obviously they do not want them to happen because it could create damage, it could create fear, of course. But I think you should also realize that there is Russian willingness to give the impression that other countries are kind of doing things that are not legitimate, and that's why we should really not be open for the Russian narrative on this, but instead, of course, help the Ukrainians as much as we can to help them direct their attacks in the right directions, of course.
Kristersson made the remarks during a joint press briefing with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte after several recent incidents involving Ukrainian drones crossing into NATO airspace. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, or SVR, claimed earlier this week that Latvia had allowed Ukraine to use its territory for possible drone attacks against Russia. Baltic officials rejected the allegations, insisting that their countries have not authorized Ukrainian attacks from NATO territory. However, several governments also acknowledged growing concerns over repeated drone incursions. Similar warnings have also been issued by Estonia and Finland following multiple incidents involving drones either crashing inside NATO territory or triggering military responses. Responding to criticism over the drone incursions, Kristersson accused Moscow of attempting to create what he described as a false narrative. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte also defended Ukraine while placing responsibility on Russia for the broader conflict.
It's a ridiculous claim by the Russians that Latvia was somehow supporting this. Totally ridiculous.
Since mid-March, Ukrainian long-range drones have repeatedly crossed Baltic and Nordic airspace while travelling towards targets in northwestern Russia, particularly oil export facilities in the Leningrad region. In Estonia, a Ukrainian drone described as Stray crashed into a power plant chimney in late March. Earlier this week, NATO scrambled a Romanian F-16 fighter jet to shoot down another suspected Ukrainian drone over southern Estonia. Lithuania has also reported at least 4 separate incidents involving suspected Ukrainian drones entering its airspace. Finland and Romania have likewise recorded multiple drone-related security incidents in recent months. In Latvia, political fallout from the drone incursions became severe after 2 drones struck an oil storage facility on May 7th. The failure to intercept those drones led to the resignation of Latvia's defense minister and eventually contributed to the collapse of Prime Minister Evikas Selina's government. Another drone alert on Thursday prompted NATO to scramble additional fighter jets in the region. Russia has strongly rejected attempts to blame Moscow for the incidents, arguing instead that Ukraine is either unable to control its long-range drones or is being assisted by neighbouring NATO states. Poland's Prime Minister has issued one of the starkest warnings yet from a Western leader about the threat Russia poses to NATO's eastern flank, saying an attack on alliance territory could come within months. Speaking to the Financial Times, Donald Tusk said the question keeping him and his neighbours up at night is no longer whether Russia might act, but whether the United States would respond if it did.
For the whole eastern flank, my neighbours, the question is if NATO is still an organisation ready, politically and also logistically, to react, for example, against Russia if they try to attack. I'm talking about short-term perspectives, rather months than years. For us, it's really important to know that everyone will treat the NATO obligations as seriously as Poland. Washington treats Poland as the best and closest ally in Europe. But for me, the real problem is what it is in practice if something happens.
Tusk's comments land against a backdrop of deliberate Russian provocation. This week, Moscow flew nuclear-capable Tu-22M3 bombers over the Baltic Sea in a 4-hour show of force, with NATO fighters scrambling to intercept them. Russia's own defense ministry confirmed the escort, framing it as routine. Tusk later defended his comments.
There is no doubt. These are declarations from the American side, repeated for many, many months, that Europe must defend itself and must rely primarily on its own strength, along with the skepticism of the Washington administration towards NATO as such, towards the European Union as such. These are also not new. I want to shake up all those who want to live in delusions, in illusions. Russia is preparing for further acts of aggression. We know this. It doesn't just seem that way. We know it.
Russia, meanwhile, has accused Baltic states of allowing Ukrainian drones to use their airspace for strikes on Russian oil ports, claims NATO members flatly reject. Kremlin's Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, asserting Russia's right to self-defense. Tusk also made headlines for cracking a joke that there was immense relief among EU leaders for the latest summit, because for the first time in years, there were no Russians present in the room. Russia's top envoy Kirill Dmitriev hit back at the Polish leader.
See you in 2 months as you come to Russia to beg for energy. Please save enough jet fuel for the flight.
For Tusk, however, the answer lies in a Europe that stops depending on Washington's goodwill and starts building the practical tools to defend itself, describing European reintegration around common defence as his personal mission and, increasingly, a matter of urgency.